News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Back, ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you this segment of the Conduit News Radio is brought to you by the Patriots of Act 746. They are on a mission to educate the people of Arkansas about your Second Amendment constitutional rights here in Arkansas, as well as Act 746 specifically. Owning or carrying a weapon, rather, has been decriminalized, and that is because of Act 746. And so find out more. Look them up on Facebook. They're a 12,000-plus strong group on Facebook. It's the Patriots of Act 746. And joining us now to talk more about this, we have once again Mr. Dan Borum is up with us this morning. Dan, welcome, sir.
Good morning, Paul. How are you doing this morning?
I am doing well. What about you? What's new in your world?
Oh, my. Lots of things are new in my world. It's been a very busy world here lately. Sometimes, hey, Paul, you ever feel like you're beating your head against the wall?
Yes. Quite. I mean, yeah. Like every day? Yeah, absolutely.
I think most people who do fight for the good and the right and our constitutional values do feel like they're beating their head against the wall many days, but we can't quit. We can't throw the towel in. We got to keep fighting, brother. And before you introduced me, you was talking about the Patriots of Act 746, and I'll just reiterate again from several times back when I was on your show that this is one of the greatest groups that I have ever joined. Back when I first joined, I didn't know very much about our gun laws in Arkansas. I just, I drank the Kool-Aid and I just believed the lie. And these people educated me, and what they did, they whetted an appetite for me to start researching for myself and to educate myself through good resources. And I've come so far because of that. I've got a long ways to go and learning more. And your program, great men and women in the Patriots of Act 746 that debate with one another, iron sharpens iron. And, man, it is unlimited of what you can learn through good groups such as this. So I encourage people out there who are listening to, if you've never looked up Patriots of Act 746, I encourage you to do so.
Yeah, no doubt. And, the people there are great. And, I mean, one of the reasons that this, relationship exists, I mean, not only am I a huge, believer in the Second Amendment as a human right,
right.
I also know that these are engaged citizens, and I want them to also, stick around this program and listen to, our tax policy. What is the state of Arkansas, in terms of, are we growing government or are we shrinking government? Because I know that having a limited government is important to most believers in, the Second Amendment and Act 746, and it's actually really, I believe it's worked out very well in terms of getting the information and really just getting like-minded people together to organize, in an effort to have a government that reflects the will of the people. And right now, we don't have that as much as we should,
No, we do. We absolutely do not. It's very aggravating to me that when you look at the Republican platform, one of the number one things in the Republican platform is limited government, letting the people rule themselves. That's what the Constitution, that's why the Constitution was written the way that it was. It wasn't to limit the people, it was to limit the government. And so the Republican platform is limited government. And yet we see this government growing. And I get very aggravated from a local level to the state level because so many who are called Republicans, they choose party over principle rather than looking at the principle over party. And
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, yes, folks, it's time to roll your sleeves up. Time to start the week. Thanks so much for being with us. This is Conduit News Radio. I am Paul Harrell, and this is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine. Thank you so much for being with us. The phone number, if you want to call us or text us today, 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Man, what a great weekend. I hope everybody had a good weekend. Hope everyone's looking forward to this coming Sunday, where we celebrate Easter and the resurrection of Jesus Christ and his defeating death, the ultimate physical barrier of this world that we live in. Obviously, building up to Good Friday, which here on the program, we have Johnny Cash Friday, but we also, on Good Friday, we make sure that we play all of his best Christian themed songs. It's really, really a fun time. All right, so where are we going with this? What's in the news? Well, at the bottom of this hour, I want to talk about the task force, the Tax Reform and Relief Task Force or farce or whatever, because I really want to set the what the expectations are and why I have been critical of this from the beginning, and why I still hope that they actually do reduce taxes. I hope they actually do reduce spending and reduce the size of government, but I am skeptical, and I'm going to lay out why I'm skeptical. We'll talk about that. Then, of course, at the top of the next hour, we have Governor Asa Hutchinson, who's now sent out a letter fundraising, and it's interesting to look at his campaign talking points. He sent out a letter to a bunch of folks, me included, which was hilarious. I got this letter, Dear Mr. Harrell. I'm like, oh, okay. And he's asking for money, and he lays out what he's done, what he's accomplished, and that sort of thing. We're going to go over that at 7 o'clock. And then there's even more after that. But look, I wanted to start this morning with this story. And the reason I want to start here is because I want you to know that at the Marble Palace, conservatism is on life support, but it is not dead yet. So be encouraged. Conservatism is on life support, but it is not dead yet. Joe, go ahead and throw this up here. We have the House GOP caucus chooses a new leader. And this has to do with the different shakeups there when it comes to, not only do you have a new Speaker of the House for the next General Assembly, which is Matthew Shepard, okay, but you also have a new majority leader in State Representative Marcus Richmond, who's a friend of this program. You also have a new whip, who is State Representative Brant Smith, okay? And as I'm reading through this article here, headline, House GOP caucus chooses new leader. Richmond of Harvey rules out any blue wave, predicts party gains this year. So that's kind of the beginning of this article. It's just talking about how State Representative Marcus Richmond here, he doesn't really think there's going to be a blue wave in Arkansas or anything like that. But it does, very interesting. I want to remind you, though, the type of battle that we have going on right now is very much one of defense, where we're having to defend tax increases, proposals for tax increases and things like that, try to fight them off. And so this particular sentence is just one to at least note that the House is now composed of 75 Republicans and 24 Democrats. So that'd be the first thing I would want to remind you of: 75 Republicans and 24 Democrats. Now, at least at least two of those Republicans are Democrats who switched to being Republicans and immediately got committee chairmanships, which is odd. See, those are the little things. Those are the little things that, when you know those facts, it breaks down the facade. It breaks down the appearance of unity. They want that so bad. These big government Republican establishment folks, these guys, ladies and gentlemen, are they really don't like it when they are exposed as not being conservative, whether it's their voting record, whether it's what they have proposed as far as policy that's progressive or liberal, or whether it's being mentioned on this radio show. They really do not appreciate it very much at all. So here now, State Senator Terry Rice, Republican from Waldron, and he was reelected in 2016 without any opposition. So on March 12th, this was back on the 12th, in the middle of the month, the State House Republican Caucus elected Richmond over two freshmen, Representatives Carlton Wing of North Little Rock and Jeff Williams of Springdale. Richmond succeeds Representative Matt Pitch of Fort Smith, who is running for the Senate. Now, Matt Pitch, again, trying to run for Jake Files' seat up there in Fort Smith, District 8. It keeps going here. Let's see here. Hang on a second, because this is what I wanted to talk about here. Richmond said his goals as leader include supporting Governor Asa Hutchinson's initiative to reduce the number of state agencies reporting to the governor and making the state more competitive through regulation and tax reform. Okay, that's good. With all the talk of the motivation behind Governor Asa Hutchinson and his election year announcement that he wants to reduce state agencies by 50%. I mean, can we all say, wouldn't that be great? Can we all say that we would support that? Absolutely. I hope Asa succeeds. The problem in that, depending on we agree on what the definition of his words are, what does the word reduce mean? That's the problem. That's the whole problem with Governor Asa Hutchinson and the court at the Marble Palace. The whole problem is you say words that people interpret to be a conservative philosophy of governing. Reduce state agencies by 50%. But then you go listen to John Brummett on Talk Business and Politics, who said, you can claim to reduce state agencies by 50%, but it doesn't mean that we're going to spend any less. It doesn't mean we're going to spend any less at all. It doesn't mean we're actually going to shrink government. It's essentially what he's saying. But when you put out that you're going to reduce state agencies by 50%, I think most people think, oh, he means shrink the size of government. Now, what kind of person would you be if you said you wanted to reduce government by 50% or reduce state agencies by 50%, but not really mean shrink the size of government? What kind of a person would you be? And how did your parents raise, what would you, I think most people would have been raised to believe that if you did that, okay, then that would be wrong. That would be not a stand-up way to deal with your fellow human beings. If you were saying one thing, but you really meant another, and you were just using the particular word to get through whatever period of time you needed to get through. In this case, could be the election. But all that being said, we can all say, yeah, we hope he does it, depending on what the definition of reduce actually is. Reduction in government. So State Representative Marcus Richmond said his goals are to do that. And then, of course, through regulation and tax reform, or making us more competitive through regulation reform and tax reform. And I'm going to talk more about that tax reform again here coming up at the bottom of this hour. He said other goals include finding a solution to infrastructure funding, strengthening public schools while providing parents with educational options, and supporting continued efforts by the governor to seek waivers to reduce the cost of Arkansas's Medicaid expansion program, which uses Medicaid dollars to buy health insurance for low-income people. Stop. Okay, so I have been hearing over the weekend, and this is just because people, when you're talking about a $2 billion program, people will find any excuse not to want to side with the people that want fiscal responsibility in government. If you're directly benefiting from the $2 billion a year that's going to make Blue Cross Blue Shield rich, right? But what we're hearing now from establishment types is that to be against, let's say, Arkansas Works is you don't have a plan. You guys don't have a plan. You guys are just the no caucus. You don't have a plan. You're against everything. No, that's not true. That's not true. So first of all, if you hear that, guys, the first thing you need to know is the idea that those who are in opposition to Obamacare, Arkansas Works, Asa Hutchinson's, baby, that we don't have a plan is not true. We have articulated that plan. It's a very simple plan. You just freeze enrollment, and then you seek a waiver to have the same match rate as 90-10, and you move them over to traditional Medicaid. At that point, it is now cheaper than what we're doing now, and you're not going to have this money going to put pharmacies out of business, state taxpayer dollars. You're not going to have this big business that's now intertwined with government where we can't tell where one ends and the other begins. You're not going to have all of that. Now, that is a plan moving forward. Now, that's not a plan the special interests would like. That's not a plan that maybe the medical community is going to like. But it is a plan. It may be a plan that you disagree with, but please don't say that the conservative side at this point doesn't have a plan, because we do have a plan. It's just a plan you disagree with. So let's be clear about that. And it's a viable plan because it's what a lot of other states have done now we're in this mess, and it is a mess. Now, the problem is we have people on the establishment side, they don't want to admit that it's a mess. They want to act like it was innovative. They want to act like that it was conservative, and it wasn't. And objectively, that's the truth, because this doesn't fly. If it was so conservative, how come other Republican states didn't do it? Are we to believe that Arkansas came out of the shadow of Bill Clinton, which we're not out of yet, by the way, but we went from being a blue state, the only blue state left in the South, to a red state, to all of a sudden we are now, more conservative and have better policies than states like Texas, Tennessee, and Oklahoma? And the answer is no, because we're still the highest tax state among those states. We spend $8,000 per person when other states spend $5,000. Right? We are a welfare state, and that's really what you should change the name of on the back of Arkansas's license plate, or on the Arkansas license plate. It should no longer be the natural state. It should be the welfare state. And the Republicans who were elected to replace Democrats were given a mandate to try to fix that. Were given a mandate to try to stop that, and instead they have encouraged it under the leadership of Governor Asa Hutchinson, even though he's going to say otherwise in his little campaign letter he sends out for fundraising. All right, back to this. So we're talking about Majority Leader, the new Majority Leader, State Representative Marcus Richmond. And again, I just want you to know, conservatism is on life support, but it's not dead yet. And I really do believe that with State Representative Marcus Richmond, it is a really positive, it's a positive thing, in my opinion. It's a positive development, okay? Let's see, the governor, yeah, and by the way, that whole waiver that the governor was trying to seek, okay, for Arkansas Works, he didn't get the biggest part of the waiver. I'm beginning to wonder if we knew we weren't going to get it all along. I mean, it was the only thing that was really going to save money, was to get the feds to say, hey, we'll let you drop the coverage from 138% down to 100%. It was the only thing that was really going to save money. It was the only thing you could argue of them legitimately making efforts to try to stop this fiscal train wreck, that we're approaching. The bridge is out. There is no more track left, and we're all on this train together. Okay, keeps going here. Now, this is what is interesting. Michael Wickline here is writing that what's interesting is that State Representative Marcus Richmond, when it came time to fund Arkansas Works Obamacare this, a couple weeks ago, that Richmond voted against the appropriation. And he was asked about that, and he's quoted as saying, "The Medicaid expansion is the policy of Arkansas, and I accept that. I may not vote for it, but I'm going to work to make it better." Richmond said that he could vote for the appropriation in the future if we get the federal government to block grant down to the state. He also said the appropriation could have his support if other changes are made to the Medicaid expansion under Hutchinson's leadership. Then we have President Donald Trump's administration earlier this month approved Arkansas's plan to impose a work requirement on certain people in Medicaid expansion. And we've talked about how those work requirements aren't really, they're at the very least, or I'm sorry, at best, they're part-time work requirements, but then there's all these exemptions and everything else. Then it talks about the new whip, Brant Smith. Earlier this month, Smith told the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette he expected to vote for the medical services appropriation. The federal government approved the work requirement waiver. Last week, Smith said he felt like he could have voted for the appropriation if the federal government had approved the state's request for a waiver. Smith said he voted against the appropriation this year because he has to be consistent to the promises he made when he was elected. And, that was a lot of this. And that makes people so mad. That makes big government Republicans down there so mad when you use that excuse, when you don't vote the way the lobbyists and the special interests want you to, and instead you use the excuse, well, this is what my constituents elected me to do. Boy, it drives them nuts. It drives them absolutely nuts. Especially people like Senator John Cooper, who is and will always be the Benedict Arnold of the Arkansas General Assembly. And we'll have more on that at 7:30. Don't go anywhere, folks. Back in a minute.
At Glenside.
This is Mother Government. My people. The promised revenue gathering to fund my motherly goals, such as the Arkansas Works Obamacare private option, has commenced. I have asked my representatives and senators to execute my will concerning new revenues from the tires you use to drive on my roads, the candy and sodas you consume and purchase in my stores, and the digital products you download on my internet. Your sacrifices and tributes, which are owed, display a measure of obedience, but there are still collectible sacrifices I require from the people to increase the work and size of our great government of Arkansas. There are two matters left unresolved. 1. I require a general tribute for all purchases made on my internet. Not just digital products, but all products. My dear children, there are those who would thwart my motherly goals of progress. If you see them, please combat their misguided notions of freedom by using phrases like mom and pop, and tax cheat. 2. I still require more revenue sacrifices concerning your consumption of my gasoline. I require your undying loyalty on the subject. Subjects, in conclusion. More revenue is good. Static revenue is bad. This message was brought to you by your stewards, aristocrats serving Arkansas. Thank you, my children, in advance for your required and expected obedience that keeps society safe and prosperous. And always remember, from cradle to grave.
HP Parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, good morning. Welcome back. Hey, just so you know, we have a new whiteboard up in the studio. You can go over to facebook.com/Conduit News if you want to check out what it says for yourself. I mean, I'm about to tell you what it says, but still, you can go to conduitnews.com or facebook.com/Conduit News and join in on the, on the viewing of the show, the watching of the radio program. All right, so what do we got here this week? We are looking at dentists, pharmacists, farmers next. Yeah, I started thinking to myself this morning. I was like, what's the whiteboard going to be? Well, I just started thinking of all of the affluent voters who are in these professions. Farmers, pharmacists, dentists. There are more, actually. Lions, tigers, bears. Yeah, the Lion Caucus, not very happy. I will say this. I think we'll be able to add some, we need to actually get a more comprehensive list. I mean, the dentists were upset because they picked some guy who had a narcotics violation, or ASA did, and they didn't go with what the association wanted, right? Pharmacists are upset because their own taxpayer dollars are being used to be given to Blue Cross Blue Shield, who's got a sweetheart deal with CVS Caremark and is going to put local pharmacists out of business. Folks, you realize if we hadn't done CVS Caremark, and I've got on a reliable source, I mean, CVS Caremark would not be here if it wasn't for what we did. What the Republicans did. And, there's some people that can argue. A Republican, you're throwing. I mean, this was started with Democrat Governor Mike Beebe and his, quote, Republican, end quote, Speaker of the House, Davy Carter, that was elected with Democrat support. And, you got to wonder, back when that happened, I mean, what was going on? And instead of trying to lead us out of it and end the program responsibly and lead us out of it, the Republicans have chosen to just continue the program. And sometimes I wonder how our federal delegation, by the way, would feel about that. When you look at our federal delegation and how hard that they've worked to represent the will of the constituents and being against Obamacare nationally, being against Obamacare in Washington, D.C., which is a very difficult thing to do, by the way, because the media absolutely loves it. And yet their own state back home perpetuated this concept that we can somehow operate underneath the umbrella of Obamacare and it can be conservative. I mean, it's madness. It is absolute madness any way you look at it. Anyway, it's just so back to this. Dentists, pharmacists. Okay, pharmacists are obviously mad because of the PBM things. And then you have farmers. The farmers have been upset for a while. I mean, there's a reason that the governor tried to take over the plant board now, not once, but twice. And look, I know I'm going to get called about that one because people just, no, it wasn't trying to take over the plant board. Listen, okay? People were very upset about what the plant board did. And, I wasn't upset about it. But I'm just telling you, people who think that their power means something are upset, and the governor did try to take over the plant board the first time, and that was stopped, right? In part thanks to a YouTube video of this program, what we did with a farmer who was talking about how bad the situation was. My point is how many more? What else does it take? How many more affluent voter or constituency groups, pharmacists, dentists, farmers, are going to realize, hey, something is wrong at the Marble Palace?
I believe, in principle, if you call yourself a Republican, yet you do not stand on that true Republican platform of limited government, lower taxes, then I'm not going to choose you because you have your name as a Republican. I'm going to choose the principle. And yet that makes many so-called Republicans angry. I don't understand that, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure either. You know, I kind of wonder if if there's an active deception. Do they really just want the power, and that, you know, they campaign on popular ideas, and then they get in there and they don't want to implement those ideas, or they come back with excuses as to why it can't be done, or you just don't know the way things work in the Senate or the way things work in Little Rock, and it's really, really frustrating. There is a disconnect from reality down there, for sure.
And that's it. That's it. There's a disconnect. And that disconnect is between the representatives, the senators, and between them and the people. And while I'll put, you know, I can understand, you get down there, you get in the Marble Palace, and you're surrounded by your peers that are doing the same thing, and then you have the outside world that sometimes you can have a disconnect very easily. And the reason I know this is when I was in seminary for 5 years, I went to the Missionary Baptist Seminary in Little Rock over on Stagecoach Road. And it was a very good school, but I was around preachers day in and day out, sitting in a classroom with them. And I found myself having a disconnect with the outside world, with the people who needed to hear the gospel, the people that needed for me to serve them. And when I realized that, I repented, and I got back to what I was supposed to be. And I think there's that same scenario in Little Rock, that there's a disconnect. They forgot who they're serving, and then we the people need to stand up and quit being so apathetic.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that they understand that they serve us.
Wow.
And that's what we have to do.
That is a really profound analogy about you going to seminary and being around everybody. You get in that bubble, and then you kind of get disconnected. That is a really, really good analogy, Dan. And I also want to make an observation. Yes, it is an election year, and yes, Governor Hutchinson has a primary, but he did go ahead and sign that pharmacy bill in the special session. You know, the pharmacists were being, he did do that. And I think there's a reason. I think one of the reasons is that the pharmacists. All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Conduit News Radio. Thanks so much for being with us. You can check us out over on, again, Facebook.com/Conduit News. We're up and going now. That's Facebook.com/Conduit News. Let's see here. 9 out of the top, 12 economic markers in Arkansas are farm-related. I didn't realize that, Bruce. Bruce on Facebook telling us 9 out of the top 12 economic markets are, I'm sure that you mean markets. Yeah, I mean, that sounds right. I mean, it definitely wouldn't dispute that. Yeah, see, I'm just hearing from folks, back to this kind of this whiteboard, who else is going to get mad? What other affluent voter groups that show up to vote during primaries are going to get mad or have already gotten mad about what's going on? The leadership down in the Marble Palace. I mean, I've heard that there are, a growing list. We may be able to add to this list: dentists, pharmacists, farmers. And there's actually more. If you just want to take the not allowing the board recommend, like if you take the association, like the dental association, they recommend who they'd like to be on the board. Or there's actually more that's happening where these associations are recommending who they think, and the governor's just like, nope, not going to do it. The governor picks somebody else. The governor will pick a corporatist. In the case of the dental board, then of course I think they found somebody else. I think they eventually corrected it, because I think they realize it is a big problem. But if the whisper campaign is this: if you want to get on a board, then at some point, somewhere down the line, someone accepts donations. That's what dentists will tell you. That is what's going on. All right, I want to talk about the Tax Reform and Relief Legislative Task Force. I said it right, didn't I? You're surprised, right? So, I guess last week, maybe it was even on Friday, I was pretty, I had a pretty detailed segment on the concept of tax increases. Now, let's explore that first. Tax increases. If you eliminate the loopholes, or let's say loopholes, I'm using the word I don't even want to use. If you eliminate the exemptions, okay, the legal exemptions that are given to the sales tax rate or whatever, if you eliminate those exemptions, which means the government will be getting more money, and you don't decrease the amount of taxes elsewhere, that is a tax increase. Can we agree that that would be a tax increase? See, we got to figure out what their again, back to what Hutchinson said, where he wants to reduce state agencies by 50%. Well, what does he mean by reduce? What's his definition of reduce? Works good for headlines, works good for last-minute reelection efforts. But what do you actually mean by reduce? So we just got to agree on what definitions are. Can we agree that it will be a tax increase, that the tax farce will have increased your taxes if they cut exemptions out of the tax code, thereby giving more money to the government, but do not cut taxes elsewhere an equal amount? Can we agree that that would be a tax increase because the government would have more money? I think reasonable people should be able to agree that that is the definition of a tax increase. Okay? Now, where we're going to disagree is what the definition of a tax cut is. And I'm talking about me and the establishment. This is where we're going to disagree. Because you see, if that scenario plays out, that would be a revenue-neutral shift in our tax policy. It would be tax shifting. If it plays out the way, if they actually do reduce exemptions and then reduce taxes elsewhere, okay. But see, they would call that a tax cut. I would say no, that's not a tax cut. Revenue neutral tax cuts are not tax cuts. It's just tax shifting, right? So we're going to disagree on that because if they accomplish that alone, reduce exemptions, and then reduce taxes by the equal amount, thereby giving the government the same amount of money. If they do accomplish that, they are going to go all around the state and they're going to claim that they cut your taxes when they, in fact, didn't, and the government is getting the same amount of money that it did before. And again, I will reference you to the Lieutenant Governor, Tim Griffin, and his letter when the task force started, his letter to the task force saying, you really got to look at spending if you want to do this the right way. You have to have spending under control. You have to have conversations about spending. I would venture a guess that in many cases they don't want to have a detailed conversation about spending because it may reveal that Asa Hutchinson has increased spending over $600 million in the time that he's been here. And I think that's a sore spot because that is not fiscally conservative at all. But anyway, Senator Jim Hendren, who is now the president of the Senate or will be the president pro temp of the Senate, thereby making the Senate a state agency under the executive branch because, of course, we have an uncle as the head of the executive and we have a nephew who's the head of the Senate. Thereby, again, the Arkansas Senate is now a state agency. It is no longer an actual independent legislative body. And the Senate chose to do this. They chose to have the appearance of being a state agency. They're going to say, we're not a state agency. We're still not. Well, you certainly look like a state agency. I'll tell you that right now. All right, so we have the series of tweets. Throw these tweets up here, Joe. This is Senator Jim Hendren, and this is what he tweeted out. I wanted to talk about it. He said, here's a link to the legislation that creates the Arkansas Tax Reform and Relief Task Force, okay? And this is tweet 1 of 7. Tweet 2 of 7 reads, "We have two purposes. 1, reform our tax code by simplifying and modernizing. 2, as title says, determine best method to cut taxes, relief, that will be fair and make us more competitive." Tweet 3 of 7 reads, "Arkansas has the third highest sales tax relative to personal income in the country, primarily because special interests have successfully carved out over $1 billion in sales tax exemptions. That is a fact." 4 of 7. "Anyone who says that the task force's purpose is to raise taxes is being intellectually dishonest. I expect good policy debate about justification of exemptions, but hopefully we can avoid straw man arguments about tax increases." All right, now stop. This, to me, should make everyone hold on to their wallets a little tighter. And the only reason I say that is because the establishment's MO, and Jim Hendren is the establishment, is to come. I mean, it's almost the more forceful they come out against, forceful they come out for a specific policy, there's always something else going on in the background. So it makes me kind of nervous. But again, I want to eat crow so bad, folks, you have no idea. I want to eat crow so bad because that means government would have gotten smaller and we would be more competitive when we would be less taxed. I mean, we are taxed less is what I'm trying to say. We would have some good things going on. I'm just very skeptical because these tax farces are not a good way to govern. They are a way to whittle down legislators who are more easily controlled. I'm sorry. I mean, for some of you on that task force, you might want to ask yourself, did I get put on this task force because they think they can control me? Now, not all of you. I'm just saying you might want to consider that being a possibility. I mean, it's for your own good to consider that. You should be considering that every morning when you wake up, especially if you're in politics. Is, am I being manipulated? I mean, if you don't have those thoughts, you need to look around where you're at, okay? So he says, if you're going to talk about raising taxes, that we're being intellectually dishonest. I think we have good reason to be skeptical of them raising taxes. Because if the government, they don't like this argument, but if the government ends up getting more money than they are getting now, that would be a tax increase. Can we agree on that definition? If the government ends up getting more money than they're getting now, that would be a tax increase. That would mean you didn't cut taxes enough other places. I don't think that's being intellectually dishonest. Now, maybe you do. I am just trying to warn because I've been down this path before. And just because you say a bill says one thing, we've been over this, it actually accomplishes the complete opposite. And in this case, Senator Hendren has a clear record of saying that his bill would have ended Medicaid expansion in 2015. And by the way, somebody give me a call if it has ended yet. He said it over and over again. Very upset, very defensive when people called out and read the bill and said, you're not ending the program. Right? So we have, cue up this audio. Here's Governor Asa Hutchinson back when they were trying to cut military retirement tax, the military retirement income tax. So if you're retired military, it was going to cost us $13 million to just absorb the tax cut, right? $13 million. And the governor said this. No, it's fine.
Please note that the other conservative and responsible approach was when it came to providing the tax cuts that's still going through the system for the military retirees, that we wanted to make sure that was paid for. So we didn't say, well, we're just going to absorb that. We have to pay for it. We have to close off exemptions. And so there are many that, not many, but there were some that were saying, we don't like to have those offsets. We don't like to have a paid for. We just want to absorb that into our budget. That's not a conservative, responsible approach. And we took that approach. I feel very comfortable with it. And,
Stop. So what the governor is saying there, this was back when they were trying to offset the military retirement tax cut plan. He's saying that to just absorb it or to make cuts elsewhere is not conservative. He says it's not conservative. Now, again, very disconcerting or very concerning to me, because you have Asa defining what conservatism is, and the way he's defining it is actually liberalism. That's very concerning to me. We've been over this before. But so I think we could say the governor has an aversion, okay, to cutting spending so that we can have tax cuts. And I'm just going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say that the task force is going to do whatever the governor wants. Call me crazy. I just think it being chaired by Senator Jim Hendren, the governor's nephew, I have a feeling that there's meetings taking place and there's going to be some sort of plan that the governor is. Let me just say this. Can you imagine if they came out and the governor was opposed, like legitimately opposed to what they were doing? I don't think that's going to happen. And I think he'd have to be born, yesterday. I mean, it just is what it is. Now, fast forward to today. That was last year. This is this year. And we now know that military retirement tax cut was actually a tax increase, because while they did give our brave men and women who have served long enough to retire in the military a tax break on their income taxes here in Arkansas, they raised taxes on digital downloads, they raised taxes on candy and soda, and when it's all said and done, the government actually got more money at the end of the day than they did before. It didn't actually offset. It wasn't even an offset. It wasn't neutral. They ended up getting more money. And Senator Hendren says, no, we didn't get more money. We took that extra $8 million and we transferred it into a Medicaid trust fund, as if because they got the money and immediately spent it or shifted it somewhere else, it's not a tax increase. It's very strange, but it just shows you how defensive they are. And by the way, that data comes from the Bureau of Legislative Research. And I know you want to twist. In committee, they like to, especially after this program airs, they like to go to committee, and then they like to twist Department of Finance and administration officials' arms to get them to just publicly agree with them. There are more people that listen to this radio program, though, than are in their little committee room, even if it is in the MAC building with no cameras, so nobody can know what's going on. People want to do your business in secret. All right. Goes on. The governor, Asa Hutchinson, has already proposed an income tax cut approximately of $180 million. The task force's recommendations may ask for more, less, or modify, but rest assured there will be no proposals for net tax increases. Well, of course, neither was the military retirement tax. That wasn't a proposal for a net tax increase. You guys were claiming it was revenue neutral. I'm not suggesting. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me clarify, Jim. I'm not suggesting that your actual proposal will be so overt that you claim we need more money and we're going to score it and we're going to show that the government is going to get more money after this is all said and done. I'm not claiming that you're going to be that transparent. I'm claiming that at the end of the day, when the bill's passed, I just have a feeling that the government is going to end up bigger than when this whole process started. And by bigger, I mean getting more money from the people on a yearly basis. That's all I'm trying to say. And this is what happens when you get into the whole revenue neutral mindset, when it's a tax shift instead of an actual tax cut, because you're putting your elbows out and you're protecting the nest egg of the government at all costs. And I'm just saying, in order to do this right, you have to be willing to allow the government to have less money. And in order to give that money back to the people, you have to find places to cut. And right now, your philosophy is completely different. And look, I'm not coming out against eliminating exemptions. That's called broadening the base, right? Lowering rates and broadening the base. I get that. I'm not coming out necessarily against that. I think that but I'm saying when your mentality is we have to make sure we are taxing the people at a maximum rate or a maximum amount of things, it's a different mentality than saying, what is the minimum amount of money The government needs to function. That should be your mentality. And you could, if that's your mentality, if that's your base goal, of course you can broaden the base. But you should be trying to find a number, and that number should be, what is the minimum amount of money it takes to run the government? And that conversation is one that would upset John Brummett, Max Brantley, and everyone else who gets money from, and everyone else who likes to, let me just say, who enjoys a big government from a philosophical point of view. That would actually upset them. You might actually have some negative articles coming from John Brummett instead of the ones praising Asa Hutchinson as a pragmatic conservative or, mainstream conservative. Mainstream conservative that has increased spending $600 million. His sixth tweet of 7, Senator Jim Hendren, unfortunately, some will probably attempt to distort the task force's duty to review exemptions in an effort to protect their own carve-outs. Nevertheless, we will do our job and thoroughly review the Arkansas tax code from top to bottom. Again, I'm just sitting here hoping that you guys are right. I'm hoping you're right. I just don't know if we agree on the definition of what conservative is. I don't think we disagree. I don't think we agree on the definition of words. Tax cut. Anyway, I laid out those definitions. Maybe we do. Maybe we do. But we will wait and see on this. Let me just end with this. Say, Paul, why are you so skeptical of the task force? Why do you think it may end up with giving more money to the government than the government has now? Well, because of this. Speaker of the House Jeremy Gillum, on the very first day that the task force met, you had Jim Hendren there, and you had I can't remember the House guy who's head of it. Is it Lane Jean? So you got Lane Jean, you got Jim Hendren, but you got Jeremy Gillum, the Speaker of the House, and he basically starts the meeting and brings everybody together, and he says a few words. Now this is kind of bad audio, but I think if you listen. This is what Speaker of the House Jeremy Gillum said the very first meeting of the Tax Reform Task Force. Listen.
It's going to be, I think, a very robust debate that will take place over the next year and a half as to our tax policy here in Arkansas. And I know a lot has been kind of written about kind of the mandate, so to speak, and it seems to always be mentioned that it's about which tax cuts are going to be put forth in the next General Assembly, and I think you are all familiar with the fact that that is not necessarily the overriding mandate of this task force. It is to look at reform and relief and making Arkansas competitive in our surrounding areas to make sure that we have a viable tax policy. So,
okay, stop. That was so strange when he said that. I don't know if you heard that. He said everybody's been writing about the tax cuts that we're going to recommend to the next General Assembly. That is not necessarily what this task force is for. Well, then what is it for then? I mean, maybe he just misspoke. I'm not sure, but that from the very beginning has stimulated my skepticism, and it's a healthy skepticism because I don't trust these guys. We got to take a break. Back in a minute.
Buy, sell, and trade at Triple R Pawn in Ash Flat. Firearms, computers, sporting goods, musical instruments, tools, jewelry, and everything else you can think of. It's all at Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat. Gun enthusiasts, log on now to TripleRPawn.com and browse their amazing inventory. That's TripleRPawn.com. You can also call them at 870-994-PAWN. That's 870-994-7296. Let the great team at Triple R Pawn help you find what you're looking for. That's Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat, TripleRPawn.com, or call 870-994-PAWN.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
It's a PHP parody.
Hey, man, you got any of that marble rock?
Yeah, I've got the hookup.
Thanks. I need a fix real bad. I'm itching to grow some government.
How much you need?
I'm gonna need a taxpayer's dime bag.
No problem, sir. 1 taxpayer dime of marble rock. Enjoy.
Thanks, man. They don't call it Little Rock for nothing. Am I right?
Did you know your state representative or state senator may be addicted to growing government? The drug is called marble rock, and too much of it will cause marble fever. Watch for the warning signs. Does your legislator suddenly display a lack of humility when faced with basic questions? Does he or she suddenly develop hubris and pride that was not present during the campaign for office? These are signs they might be smoking the terrible drug, marble rock. The solution? Detox. Vote for detox. Vote to send them home for their own good. Warning! Some politicians once voted out of office will not go home and stay in Little Rock to get their fix by lobbying, also known as the Burris Syndrome.
PHP parody. Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
And all the things that we're doing here. And so I do have those opportunities. And what I mean by that, you've got one person that's funding, and it's his right to fund it, but it is, written papers through their Conduit for Action. They've got Conduit News that is on multiple stations across the state. So that's what I mean by that. And it's not a fair and balanced reporting. It is a advocacy group for that position of that one person that is sounding the message. And I think any fair interpretation of that is pretty much an attack machine on what I'm trying to accomplish in this state. That's their right to do that, but it's also a right at some point to say, I'm going to push back some. And so I think people should understand that this is not an independent media voice that somehow does independent analysis. It's paid advertising for Conduit.
That's Governor Asa Hutchinson. I'll have more on him trying to raise money next.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
I believe in principle. If you call yourself a Republican, yet you do not stand on that true Republican platform of limited government, lower taxes, then I'm not going to choose you because you have your name as a Republican. I'm going to choose the principle. And yet that makes many so-called Republicans angry. I don't understand that, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure either. You know, I kind of wonder if they, if there's an active deception. Do they really just want the power and that, you know, they campaign on popular ideas and then they get in there and they don't want to implement those ideas, or they come back with excuses as to why it can't be done, or you just don't know the way things work in the Senate or the way things work in Little Rock, and it's really, really frustrating. There is a disconnect from reality down there for sure.
And that's it. That's it. There's a disconnect. And that disconnect is between the representatives, the senators, and between them and the people. And while I'll put, you know, I can understand, you get down there, you get in the Marble Palace, and you're surrounded by your peers that are doing the same thing, and then you have the outside world that sometimes you can have a disconnect very easily. And the reason I know this is when I was in seminary for 5 years, I went to the Missionary Baptist Seminary in Little Rock over on Stagecoach Road. And it's a very good school, but I was around preachers day in and day out, sitting in a classroom with them. And I found myself having a disconnect with the outside world, with the people who needed to hear the gospel, the people that needed for me to serve them. And when I realized that, I repented, and I got back to what I was supposed to be. And I think there's that same scenario in Little Rock, that there's a disconnect. They forgot who they're serving, and then we the people need to stand up and quit being so apathetic.
Yeah. And
we need to make sure that they understand that they serve us.
Wow.
And that's what we have to do.
That is a really profound analogy about you going to seminary and being around everybody. You get in that bubble, and then you kind of get disconnected. That is a really, really good analogy, Dan. And I also want to make an observation. Yes, it is an election year, and yes, Governor Hutchinson has a primary, but he did go ahead and sign that pharmacy bill in the special session. You know, the pharmacists were being, he did do that. And I think there's a reason. I think one of the reasons is that the pharmacists were so organized. I mean, and they showed up down there, and they were a force to be reckoned with.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
That's exactly what it takes.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
If you don't show up, if you do not show up and show the power, look, our power as the people are in numbers. You go down there on a very hot issue, and there's 5 of you that show up. You think they're going to take you serious? Absolutely not. But there is great power in numbers, and it wakes them up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the governor knows. The governor knows that there is a growing number in the state of Arkansas that is falling in and supporting Jan Morgan, because just like the presidential election, across the nation, the people were sick and tired of the same old status quo from politicians. Therefore, that is why Donald Trump got elected. And I want to tell you something. There is a great big chance that will be the reason that Jan Morgan gets elected. And not only that, she's a very intelligent woman, and she knows what she's talking about.
Yeah.
She's not just gunned. She's much, much deeper. And people need to listen to her. In fact, on March 30th in Alma, Arkansas, at Warren's Rec Room, March 30th, that's a Friday night at 7 o'clock. We are going to have there's a Jan Morgan rally there. She's going to be there. And she's going to come into town early. At 4 o'clock, she's going to be at the big A to Z sporting goods store, just meeting people and doing a Facebook Live. And and it's going to be a really fun day. I'm really looking forward to it. And also, on that evening, before Jan comes on stage, I'm going to allow.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks so much for being with us. We do appreciate it. This is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine here. Now, what we mean by the intersection of conservative ideas and reality is we don't like politicians who just talk about conservative ideas but never actually want to implement them. They just use them, and really you and your affections for those ideas to get into a position of power and then use that power to come back and tell you how much smarter they are. We're going to have a classic example of that coming up at 7:33. We're going to dive into the political career of Senator John Cooper from Northeast Arkansas. And we feel reason to do that because he's recently, not only did he attack, his own colleagues and attacking Conduit, he's now out attacking Conduit again. Very similar to what Governor Asa Hutchinson did a couple of weeks ago. Joe, cue this back up. Start at the very beginning of this. This was Governor Asa Hutchinson on the Dave Ellswick show a couple of weeks ago. And interesting thing here is I am trying to figure out what would make the best bumper for the program, if you know what I mean. Take a listen.
And all the things that we're doing here. And so I do have those opportunities. And what I mean by that you've got one person that's funding, and it's his right to fund it, but it is, written papers through their Conduit for Action. They've got Conduit News that is on multiple stations across the state. So that's what I mean by that. And it's not a fair and balanced reporting. It is a advocacy group for that position of that one person that is
that's my position,
sounding the message. And I think any fair interpretation of that is pretty much an attack machine.
Man, I this happens a lot, you know. I mean, people. The governor does this. Other people do this. If they criticize Conduit News, they criticize our positions. Number one, by the way, just know that it's working. Know that your support of this program is working because there are very powerful people who are wanting to control the information that you're getting. But I would just tell you, I think those of you who've listened to the program for a long time and you know who I am, you know that I believe in conservatism. I've fought for conservatism as an activist, as somebody who tries to get to the bottom of that. And the idea that because I'm the host of Conduit News Radio, somehow my opinions and my thoughts are no longer my own is offensive to me, and it is simply not true. And I'm very blessed to be affiliated and to do this broadcast and do this radio show. And it's great that there is a conduit for like-minded people in the business community across this state to agree on where we want to see the state of Arkansas go. And right now, there's uniform agreement among limited government conservatives that want to see a measurable reduction in the size and scope of government, that we are moving in the opposite direction. And so when I get up every morning to tell you those things, Governor Asa Hutchinson doesn't like it, and because he knows you're now getting the truth. Keep going with what he said. But I wanted to correct the record, because that is the only thing that really, like, that is my Marty McFly chicken moment. I can't. It's a flaw. Fine. I'm not a perfect person. And I'll tell them. I mean, I know I've got critics out there who are listening right now. If you want to know how to get to me, okay, the one thing that really kind of irritates me is when people try to say that I don't actually believe the things that I say on this radio program. And that's I don't know, just because it's actually just an insult that I would, because see, if that's the case, if people say, well, you're doing this radio show and you don't really believe what you say, what you're really saying is that I'm deceiving people for money, and that is offensive to me. I'm not doing that. That's a little bit of projection and deflection from the other side, right? Because they do deceive people for money. All right. Keep going with this.
On what I'm trying to accomplish in this state, that's their right to do that, but it's also a right at some point to say, I'm going to push back some. And so I think people should understand that this is not an independent media voice that somehow does independent analysis. It's paid advertising for Conduit.
Stop.
It is paid for by
independent.
them.
And I've never. Hang on. Stop. No one's. I've never. All right. Okay. Is the Arkansas Times independent analysis? Is Fox News independent analysis? Is MSNBC independent analysis? There is no independent analysis, Governor, and you know that. I'm honest with this amazing audience that, by the way, are educated, demographics show are decision makers of their household. Oh, and voters. I'm a limited government conservative, and Conduit actually has something called an economic freedom filter. Does it grow government? Does it increase dependency on government? Does it spend money we don't have? That's a great filter as to figure out if you want to support or oppose a policy. Now, if advocacy for the Republican Party platform is extreme and you're against that, you should just come out and tell the people of Arkansas. It'll make their choice much easier in May. You're not doing that, though, are you? You are moving so hard to the right, you probably have whiplash. All right, keep going.
Message is getting out, and no one else's message is getting through.
Back up.
Analysis.
This is great. This is the best part, is when he claims that the message of Conduit News is getting out, but nobody else's message is getting out. Thank you. That's very flattering. That's very flattering, and I would love to just take your compliment as fact, and I have to disagree with you. You are the governor of the state of Arkansas. You go on MSNBC and CNN. You can go speak wherever you want, and your message gets out plenty fine. And this is really more about there being a dissenting voice out there that disagrees with you, and you don't want to tolerate it. And that's what I really think this is. I have racked my brain trying to figure out why the governor would attack Conduit News. And the only thing I can think of is that when we started exposing the lobbyists and the monolith fund of the Marble Palace Court that were giving to ACE's candidates and favored candidates, that there was a lot of people's names that got put out who were on that invitation for Breanne Davis. You remember that? And I think some of those lobbyists are mad that they're being exposed as, just participating in a system. And that's the whole thing, is it's not personal. I'm trying to expose a system that I believe, if most average Arkansans knew about, would be opposed to it and would make different choices at the ballot box because of the knowledge that you receive here listening to Conduit News. All right, keep going.
for by them, and their message is getting out, and no one else's message is getting through. It's not an analysis. It's not a reporting. It's not a news outlet, even though they represent it to be that way. And that is fine.
All right,
That's
stop.
freedom.
I've had enough of him.
But at the same time.
All right. So anyway, that's Governor Asa Hutchinson. Also, that I'm kind of doing a little show prep during the actual live broadcast because this is going to be. Oh, this will be the greatest series of bumpers we've ever done. Like when we come back from break, when we go to break, it's just going to be Asa. It's like, well, they're on several stations across the state. Conduit News Radio on several stations across the state. Yeah, we're working on it. Don't worry, it's going to happen. Let's see. Janet on Facebook writes, "Thanks at Conduit News for replaying the Asa concern about fair and balanced. I laughed. Has he ever complained about fair on his many appearances on MSNBC, CNN? Complained about Arkansas Times, Max Brantley, John Brummett. John Brummett likes him, but still." That's a great point, Janet. Hey, folks, go right now to Facebook.com/Conduit News. We're up and broadcasting live. You can watch me do the program. That's Facebook.com/Conduit News. And join in on all of the comments that are going on right now. All right. Speaking of the governor, I got a letter this weekend. I guess, when was this sent? It says Monday morning. I don't check my mail enough, honestly. I can't stand paper mail. I'm just going to be quite honest with you. I like digital stuff, but I mean, people still send stuff via the paper mail. Anyway, I don't ever check it until like once a week or something. So this weekend, I mean, it was Friday, and I'm enjoying my weekend. You know, we wrapped up the show, and I don't know. I think I got home about 1:00, and my wife was there, and my now almost 9 months, my 9-month-old baby girl, and we're just sitting there, and she said, "Hey, do you have this letter from Governor Asa Hutchinson?" Because I think it said it on the envelope. Joe, do you have the envelope in there? What does the envelope say on the front of that? Let me see that. Does it say the office of the governor on there, like in the? Yeah, all right. It says it in the return address, Governor Asa Hutchinson, and she said, "Do you want this letter?" Do you want this letter from Governor Asa Hutchinson? And my eyes got real big, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna want to read that. And so, anyway, this is what it says. "Dear Mr. Harrell," this is Asa wanting to, or this is Asa asking me and the Harrell household for money. "Dear Mr. Harrell, I'm proud to serve as your governor and of the many accomplishments we have achieved in the last 3 years. But there's still a lot to be done to make sure our great state continues to move forward. That is why I've decided to seek re-election and why I hope I can count on you, Mr. Harrell. So as we enter this election year, we must be ready for anything that our opponents throw at us. A lot can happen in 9 months. Oh, trust me, I know. I'm a first-time father. There is a lot that can happen in 9 months. A lot can happen in 9 months, Governor Hutchinson writes to me, Mr. Harrell. That is why I hope I can count on your assistance. Please join my campaign team by signing and returning the enclosed pledge of support. And if you will, please send a contribution to our Asa Hutchinson for Governor campaign for $35, $50, $100, $250, $500, $1,000, or even more, if possible, dollars. How many of you got letters like this? This is an exciting time to be an Arkansan, he writes. Propelled by our strong conservative actions, we've kept our promises, and we're reaching our priority goals. We're getting things done, he says. Exclamation point, underlined. Exclamation point. We have more people working than ever before. Now, this is talking about the low unemployment rate. More than 60,000 people are newly employed in Arkansas. Our population has surged past the 3 million mark. Well, you didn't have anything to do with that. Matter of fact, I had more to do with that than you did because we have a new baby in our household. Our population has surged past the 3 million mark. We've enacted the largest tax cut in Arkansas history. Over $150 million every year. Look at that, every year. Now, that's an interesting way of putting it. Every year. Kind of makes you think that that $150 million is now $300 million. Of course, is the $50 million still, has that even been enacted yet, or did they wait on that? Does that not start until July? Anyway. By the way, no mention that they've raised spending by $600 million. But, hey, it's good to get their campaign talking points. Notice the first couple are just like, ugh. Let's see. Oh, here's this other one. 90% of Arkansas taxpayers have seen their state taxes cut. And for military veterans, their state income tax has now been eliminated entirely on retired income. Okay, let's take that. I would challenge that figure. 90% of taxpayers have seen their taxes cut. No, what if you want to buy a digital book for your college class? You're now paying a digital downloads tax on that for your college class. Did you know that? What if you went and go buy candy and soda? Well, now you're paying the full price of candy and soda, or sales tax on candy and soda now. And for the military retirement income, I mean, it's great. Good for our military veterans. By the way, these are the same people that are talking about eliminating exemptions. We've got to eliminate exemptions, all these exemptions. Well, you just passed the exemption for military retirees. And look, if there's going to be an exemption, that's the one to have, but a little hypocritical. And not to mention that your little military retirement fiasco actually was a net tax increase. But listen to what he says. Look at that third to last bullet point. We're shrinking government by consolidating agencies and running government better and smarter. That's just hyperbole. I mean, that's just platitudes. There are fewer people on Medicaid than when I was elected. Now we're talking. There are fewer people on Medicaid. Yeah, Governor, that's after you presided over a 50% increase in the people who were on Medicaid. A 50% increase, and then all of a sudden it's time for your reelection campaign, and you start finding ways to kick them off. Hey, but let me tell you this. I saw some numbers the other day, and I'm not ready to go public with them yet, but I saw some numbers the other day that made me think that we removed 40,000 or 80,000 or whatever the number is. It changes every time they do a news story on it. That the numbers actually don't show that. They don't reflect that they've been removed based on reporting. And so something's going on here. That's all I'm saying. I've got some numbers, for example, that, you know how there were reports, and I'm going to get to the bottom of it, but there were reports that there were as many as 340,000 people on the Medicaid rolls. I'm not seeing numbers that ever reach that high. Yet it was reported all over the place. And so we're going to get to the bottom of it, but it's something's not right with the way they're calculating the numbers, but they control the numbers. And then, of course, last but not least, Governor Hutchinson reports that you need to give him money because Arkansas is number one in the nation from computer science education, because everybody went to the polls and voted for ASA because they were in the streets picketing. We're tired of being not number one in computer science education. What is the deal? We got to take a break. Who's next to zipline?
Me, and I'm really excited about this.
Sir, I'm sorry. The zipline has a 350-pound weight limit, and frankly, I do not think it would be safe for you.
Oh, that's okay. I self-identify as 180 pounds, so it's cool.
Sir, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm afraid we can't let you ride the zipline. You're too heavy. I'm sorry.
I can't believe this. I thought we had evolved as a society. I thought this was America, but I guess this is just my plight. First slavery, and now fat shaming.
Sir, again, I'm really sorry.
You listen to me. If you don't let me ride, not only will I sue this company for discrimination, I will sue you for damages because right now my feelings are so hurt and I feel embarrassed because I'm holding up the line.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Watch it, mister.
Look, okay, I'm sorry. I just don't think it would be safe for you.
You don't understand. I self-identify as skinny. So you have to let me ride the zip line. The Constitution says so. I get to define my own reality.
Oh, you know what? Okay, fine. Whatever. Ride the zip line. Mike, let this man ride the zip line.
Thank you. Now watch as my self-identity trumps your bigotry. See you on the other side, racist. Here I go!